Good afternoon. My name is Elizabeth Erline, and I'm Assistant Vice President of Research and Programs at the National Health Council. I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, which is the second in a three-part series we are hosting to provide the healthcare community with a practical introduction to health literacy. And today's topic is health literacy strategies for advocacy. Next slide, please. Today's webinar is being hosted by the National Health Council, and we were created by and for patient organizations 100 years ago. We bring together diverse organizations to forge consensus and drive patient-centered health policy. And the NHC's core membership includes the nation's leading patient organizations, whose logos are listed on this slide. Next slide, please. First, I'd like to go over just a couple of housekeeping items. The first note is that the first hour of this webinar will be recorded and available on the NHC's website afterwards. The second hour is a workshop for NHC members and non-members who have registered for our upcoming Science of Patient Engagement Symposium. All attendees will be automatically muted, and you cannot unmute yourself during this first hour of the session. Please submit any questions through the Q&A function. Next slide, please. And I'd like to welcome our colleagues from Health Literacy Media, a nonprofit organization based in St. Louis, Missouri, to present today's session. For folks who joined last week, you will already know who Lisa and Chris are, but in case you are unable to join, Lisa Carey is a senior health literacy writer and editor at HLM. And Chris Casey is Senior Health Communication Coordinator at HLM. So Lisa and Chris, I'd like to kick it over to you to get us started. Thanks.
Thank you. Lisa, you are still on mute.
There we go. Okay, thanks so much, Elizabeth. And thanks, Chris. We're delighted to be here again this week with you. Thank you for joining. Here's our agenda for the day. First, we're going to just talk very briefly about why health literacy matters for advocacy work. Then we'll go into the strategy part, writing health literate materials for advocacy, then on to motivating patients on health issues. And finally, just a few resources for health literacy and advocacy work. And I do want to mention that we will send the resources to you all, or they'll be available on the website afterwards. So just so you know, you don't have to write down every little thing. So what is health literacy and why does it matter for advocacy work specifically? Health literacy is up to both individuals and organizations. So it's two sides of that coin. Personal health literacy is an individual's capacity to get and understand health information. And we all know that there are, challenges with that. Organizational health literacy is how organizations enable those individuals to find, understand, and use health information by creating clear communications. And so, specifically for advocacy work, raising health literacy on both sides means raising self-efficacy. And if people can get the right information and understand it, they're more likely to get involved in your issue. So that's just a very brief kind of overview. So let's move on to the strategies. You'll recognize these if you joined us last week. It's tailoring your message to your purpose and audience, deciding on the scope, structuring materials for easy scanning, creating content that resonates, and designing materials to support understanding. The first one is tailoring your message. It means creating materials that address your audience's unique needs. They don't have to appeal to everyone, just appeal to your intended audience. This is just an example, a fact sheet by a breast cancer awareness group. It's a good example of tailoring your material to a specific audience. In this case, young women of color who are affected by breast cancer. You can create different versions for different audiences that you're aiming at. So, for instance, just take a moment to look at this fact sheet. Who do you think the audience is for this? You can put your answers in the chat. Can you tell? There are a few clues in here. I'm not seeing anything in the chat. Maybe you can't see it as well. Yeah, legislators, residents, industry, government. Okay, if you said based on the answer that you arrived at, what were your clues? Why did you think that people you serve, yeah, emphasis on number of population who utilize the water. Yeah, so the answer is legislators. And some of the clues here I've circled or boxed in red. It has clues like that's why lawmakers need to protect, support legislation, etc. So, okay, here's a different version of the same idea. It was in the same campaign. And this one, by contrast, this is for a young audience. And you can kind of tell, it's worded a little, it's got plenty of white space. We've got the little icons of the garbage trucks and, just the fact that we're equating the, 433 tons of trash to almost 50 garbage trucks. It's also got the image of the young kids. This was actually aimed at a middle school audience. So that's who we showed in the photo. Here's another version. This is just for sort of the general population living in the area in Northeast Missouri. So that's just, a little example of tailoring to your audience. The next strategy is deciding on the scope of your material, only including the need to know information. And so here, we've got, this is from the CDC, and they did a COVID fact sheet that gives a lot of really good, specific information. It's fairly easy to read. They have kind of, quite a bit of white space, so that's fine. But here's a different version. And so it gives the same information, but they left out some of the detail and they added the visuals. So why do you think the CDC created these two different versions? Like, who do you think they were aimed at, and which one, would you rather read? Too much reading on the left side, yeah. Yeah, the one on the right aimed at all populations. Mm-hmm. Visuals and white space, right? Yeah. So this just shows you, when you have people who are just glancing, at your materials, you need to make your materials appealing to draw them in, like the one on the right. Structuring the materials is just, kind of putting related information together, grouping by concept. Here's a long bulleted list, which, bullets are great, but not if it's a huge long list like this. Instead, here are the same bullets, but they've grouped them with kind of headings. So people can see right away, they can go to the heading, get the information that they're looking for. Using clear headings and subheadings is really important. Headings allow readers to skim for the information they're looking for. And in this example, you can see they're kind of like, 4 levels of content. There's the large main title. There are the 2 sort of rust-colored headings that break the content into 2 overall sections. Then there are the blue headings, or the subheadings, which are all in the form of questions that parents might ask about the flu. And then there's the body text. So a great way to make your materials engaging and audience-centered is to, and this is probably my #1 tip for writing materials. When you have a topic that you need to write a material about, stop and think, what are the questions that people are going to wonder about this topic? Write down all those questions. Then use those questions as your headings. And under each question, answer the question in the body text. So it's just it seems obvious, but it's a great way to structure a material and answer the questions that people will want to know. And this really overlaps with search engine optimization, SEO. If you're in charge of a website, working with SEO vendors can really help you find out what the questions are that people are plugging in to the search bar. Then you can, answer those questions that people are searching for and make sure that you have, good SEO. Okay, using bullet points. We've gone over this example right here. These really shouldn't be bulleted. They're entire paragraphs. That's not the point of bullets. So you would want to break this up into smaller, bullet points with maybe, headings or different lead-ins to different bullets. And so, each bulleted list should really be between like 2 or 3 to maybe 5 items. And each bullet should only be 1 phrase or sentence, sometimes 2, but that would be the most. And this is just an example from the NHC MFMV calculator, just how you can break something up into bullets and make it a lot easier for people to scan and understand. So now I'm going to turn it over to Chris. Or no, I'm actually going to keep going. Chris is going to present a little bit later.
I'll come in a little later.
Okay, great. So our 4th strategy for advocacy communication is to create content that resonates with your audience. A great way to engage your audience is by telling stories. Storytelling can educate, promote awareness, and motivate people to action. It can combine facts with human interest and share experiences of non-mainstream people or groups. So this example is a doctor. She's sharing her story about her journey from vaccine hesitancy to trusting in vaccines and trying to share that to help other people who may be hesitant about vaccines. So we just like to say statistics and data are important, but the right story can really change minds. Stories allow us to see the world in a different way. And that's certainly true. And you can combine those, use numbers to tell a story. Here's an infographic that we created for the Melanoma Research Foundation about the need for volunteers in melanoma clinical trials. And this is a very full page. We normally don't like to put this much content on one page, but in this case, it was important. And you'll see that it uses natural frequency, such as 1 out of 20 people, instead of percentages. Studies are kind of mixed on percentage versus natural frequency. And we're going to talk about that in next week's session. We're going to go over, numbers and data. But they show that people with low literacy may not understand percentages. So if you can, give the natural frequency followed by the percentage in parentheses, like this. Only 1 out of 20 people with cancer, and then in parentheses, 5% take part in a clinical trial. So and you can see on this page, we've used visuals, we've got the donut charts and, different types of things, different ways to make these numbers interesting and really tell people a story about this. Videos. Videos are great at telling stories, as you know. Being more engaged, they can be more engaging than images, text, or audio alone. They can appeal to different types of learners, visual learners, or those who really, aren't that confident about their reading skills. And they make your content accessible for a more sort of diverse range of people. I'm curious, how many of you are using video to reach out to your audiences? Go ahead and put that in the chat. Okay. Occasionally, yes. Webinars and recording, not enough. Not as much as we should. Yeah, videos have really become a huge part of social media. So more and more, it's good. Oh, Debbie Drell does podcasts as well. That's great. AKF, trying to do more. Great. Yeah, so video, if you do videos, then you can create all sorts of other posts and social media from those. Sharing from time to time, YouTube, considering Facebook Live. Yeah, it's a whole new world out there, isn't it? It's trying to keep up, but you go where people are going to see you the most. Quotes. Using quotes can also make your material more personal and appeal to your audience. Use them as appropriate. We did a report about farmers talking about the rising cost of health insurance and the effect that it has on their lives. And you can see some of the quotes that we got. It's, really heartbreaking. What's happening there, and if your target audience can relate to that, or if you're aimed at legislators and it's going to have an effect on them, then quotes can be a really great way to do that. And now I'm going to turn it over to Chris. No, I'm going to keep going, I think. We divided this up, and I'm sorry, I went right through Chris's section 3.
You did a great job.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. So I'm going to just keep on rolling here. Okay. So our 5th strategy is to design materials to support understanding. And that simply is, the ingredients of health literate design: color, visuals, typography, white space. All of these elements, though, should really support and not distract from your purpose and your audience. And that's why it's so important to have those in your mind. So let's talk about some of these concepts. So clear typography, font size, contrast. Choose a clear font, normally sans serif, such as Verdana, Calibri, Arial, not confined to those, but sans serif is always the best choice for digital materials. Use bold sparingly, such as for a single word or phrase that are important. The things to avoid are, small, condensed, or novelty fonts for body text, all caps and italics, which change the shape of the familiar lowercase letters. All caps are real blocky. Italics, change those shapes. People who have processing needs or, to read, or maybe you're even, reading English as a second language, they count on those familiar lowercase letters to sort of look at, memorize, and then, make sense of the words and sentences. Underlining, you might be surprised that we don't use underlining, but it runs through the lowercase, the descenders of like P and G. And so it can, distract from, and, especially if you're using digital materials, people will think it's a link. So stay away from underlining too. White space. White space is a really important design tool. It is underestimated as a design tool. So white space is not always white, but it's the area that doesn't have text or visuals, visual elements. Print and digital resources should have at least like 20 to 30% of white space so they don't look too crowded. And so here's a document. It's a government document, surprise, surprise, but it's an old one. I will say, it's an old example that we're using because it's just so good to point out, what is wrong with this document. So first of all, there's not enough white space along the margins. And also the lines are so long, especially for any reader, but especially for those who are not, real confident readers, to go all the way across there and get to the end of the line and then have to find your place back at the left margin is really difficult. So we recommend line lengths of just like 30 to 50 characters, and that includes the spacing in between words. The next thing that we kind of look at is the paragraphs and sections here are not separated by white space. Put more white space in between sections and keep headings, right with their body text that's underneath. So it ends up, the heading and the body text underneath looks like a chunk. And, putting white space in between your chunks is really helpful for readers to just see at a glance how your information is organized. So yeah, moving on, use color purposefully. Draw attention to important content. You can see in this example, there are some little blue boxes off to the side. There are green boxes for the headings. You can kind of just look at this and tell right away, oh, there are a couple of different sections. There's important information off to the side. It doesn't leave readers wondering, and it makes it look more appealing. Using high contrast colors is good. You can see on the left there with the, there's dark blue with white on it, or dark text on a light background. Those are good. The ones that are not good, low contrast, light text on a light background or dark text on a dark background. it's just so much harder for people to read your content, and your message is not going to get across. There's an example there with refugee resettlement. I'm sure the message there is very good, but it's lost. Very few people are going to struggle through this and, and try to read it. So it's a shame. Choosing meaningful visuals. This example is from that same farmer report that we helped design, and we showed some of the people who are affected. Make sure that any visuals are relevant to your purpose, representative of your audience, and hopefully diverse. They should be up to date and high quality, so your piece doesn't look like you're using clip art from the 80s or something. Keep them simple, caption them if appropriate. And finally, I'll just say studies show that the most effective visuals to draw people into your material is to show people, and especially faces. That is the number one type of image to use. So you can also use visuals to show action steps, such as washing your hands with COVID. You'll notice these action steps are actually numbered. The illustrations are very simple, keeping them simple so that people can tell what the things are. Sometimes we see people using icons that when you know what you're thinking about, the icon, can look like something you feel like, oh yeah, everybody will recognize what this icon is. But really, when you kind of step back and look at it, some of them are unrecognizable. And then of course, video is another great way to get. Okay, now I'm handing it over to Chris.
Right. Thanks, Lisa.
Mhm.
Very good. So yeah, this is the third part of our agenda. And we're moving right along here. So again, we're glad to see the chat, and we're moving along so we can make sure to have a time for Q&A at the end. But again, don't be shy to put a question into the Q&A bar, or the Q&A box. So this section of our agenda is about how principles that we use in health literacy can be used to motivate your audience around advocacy issues, around health topics. So health literacy is about motivating patients and really caregivers too, to take action to protect their health. And action, not just knowledge, is vital also in the advocacy space. Taking over the screen here. Sometimes it takes a second. Okay. All right, so motivating patients to become advocates, and really it's motivating your audience to become advocates. Oftentimes they're patients, but oftentimes they're caregivers or people who just are really passionate about a topic. And when you're clear with your communication, it makes it easier for people to get involved. So ensure that every element of the communication that you're pushing out relates back to your main message, what your issue is that you care about. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. And the second piece here is giving your audience practical tools that they need to take action. So we'll really kind of unpack both of these. So what's your main message? Think about it this way. If your audience only reads or remembers one thing from your communication, what would you want that to be? And that's kind of your main message, right? And so, this sort of fact sheet or policy brief that we worked on, that we've shown a couple of times here. What's great about the title on this is that it really asks in plain language this important question that's really frames up the main topic for this piece, right? And the subtitle here really, as we saw before, and you responded in the text, this really frames it up, and why it matters, who this is for, and what they can do, right? So your main message should be concise. Stick to one topic. This is about clean water. It doesn't go off into other advocacy issues. And so, clean water, everyone needs clean water. You need it to drink and bathe in and grow our food. Everyone takes a shower and eats food. So, making it relatable. People are more likely to act if they see how an issue affects them personally. Sort of altruistic appeals can be attractive. They can feel good, but they're less likely to motivate people to action compared to messages that say, well, this is how this affects you personally. And so as we spoke of before, your main message should be tailored to your audience. What do they care about? So for legislators who are hoping to have economic growth, we appeal to the idea of recreation and waterways driving economic activity. And lastly, actionable. What do you want people to actually do? For the purpose of a brief introduction, lawmakers need to protect our water. This piece obviously goes on to talk in more specifics about what that means in terms of legislation and so on. But it really frames that topic. And so let's just kind of go into these a little bit more. So giving people the tools they need to act. So what does that mean? You want to make it easy for people to get involved and take action. You want to lower the burden on your audience as much as you can. Don't make them be creative or come up with ideas on their own for how to take action. So give them concrete, specific actions they can take. And so in this example here, it's from social media, from an advocacy group here in our city of St. Louis. So it gives a web link that you can follow. And to unpack this further, you can often give people the exact verbatim text that you want them to write to elected representatives. It's a lot easier to copy and paste than it is to write an original email. Allow them to check a box or click a button in an email. We've done email campaigns where a big button outperforms an in-text link in terms of engagement and clicks. And then, again, offering links to relevant materials. So, this campaign from St. Louis Regional Health Commission just gives people everything they need to send a clear message to legislators right there on the spot. And so just to lean into this piece of giving people tools they need to act a little bit more, here's some more examples. Offering talking points or what I've seen them called message platforms on your issue can offer clear, consistent messaging that is going to be more acceptable and more relatable to the ultimate sort of policy audience. When they're seeing the same thing coming in consistently, it makes it clear what they need to do or what the issue means. So talking points are simply facts, or they could be more related to stories, as Lisa was talking about an issue that can help guide people in a conversation. Again, if it's appropriate, a sort of verbatim script can make it even easier for people to take action and do some kind of policy focused communication on their own. So here's an example from a topic that we've worked on a lot, which is kidney transplant. And so here's some specific language that we offered to sort of the transplant community that's around kidney donation. So offering resources and contact information to your audience. So offering credible resources where people can learn more, can give an audience the chance to engage with other organizations, learn more, educate themselves. It can also raise the credibility of your material when audiences know who a material is coming from and that it's sort of embedded in this sort of larger advocacy community. It can communicate that, yeah, we're professionals. We know what we're talking about. We sort of belong in this space. And all this serves to build trust. Just sort of a little reminder in the context of digital communication, clicking on a broken link is always a drag. So make sure to keep links up to date because the online space can change very quickly. Okay, and then lastly, in terms of these sort of specific tips, this comes right from health literacy, giving clear action steps. We call it behavioral specificity. So phrases like, get involved or you can change the world, those sort of vague phrases are very weak and they're abstract and they're not actionable for people. So when you build in concreteness and specificity to your language, it increases the probability that people are going to act. So this is just, a fun example from that clean water topic that we've been revisiting here. Plant trees, native grasses, and other Missouri plants in your yard. Maybe they could even take an extra step of specificity and offer some particular species of trees and plants, who knows? But again, these are very specific, concrete ideas. And so you should do the same thing in your communication. Don't just say, act today, tell people exactly what you want them to do. And again, like we've been emphasizing, give people the tools to do it. And then just kind of getting into the piece of reach. We talked a little bit about this last time. Social media is obviously here to stay, and it's a place where you can reach and grow your audience. Just to connect to the conversation previously, many of the social media platforms, their algorithms tend to reward video and show video to more people. So that can be a push too if you're thinking about getting into the video area of video. That might be a little extra push for you. And so just thinking about your audience, who are you trying to reach? Where are you going to find them? These are sort of overall tips and there's exceptions to every rule, but Facebook is, again, the most popular social media platform. It tends to skew towards a slightly older audience. Just as a side note, Facebook is where we've had at HLM, we've had a lot of success finding people such as patient groups, support groups for relatively rare conditions when we're trying to reach people to talk about a certain health topic. Instagram, if you're trying to reach sort of a more millennial kind of audience, that tends to skew towards Instagram. Twitter is the least representative of the overall population. Twitter tends to be a more educated group. And it's, again, sort of more in the millennial age group. Pinterest, Pinterest is, if you do a Google image search, Pinterest almost always pops up in the top. Pinterest is their user base skews towards women, sort of that millennial age of women. And then lastly, TikTok, it's sort of the new hotness in social media, and it really is skewing towards a younger audience. So just some rules of thumb just to think about going to where your audience is. And then, message, did I just say Twitter and more educated in the same sentence? Yeah, that's there are notable exceptions to every rule. I think I said that at the beginning, but that's a great point. I'm glad to see the smiley emoji. Yeah. So, think about how your messages are going to fit into the larger context of the social media space. If there's ever, whether it's a celebrity diagnosis or, some kind of news release or something that happened, new legislation, that's something, try to sort of jump on the coattails of that activity. And then, thinking about timing, planning ahead, expect a delay between exposure to your message and action on the part of your audience. And as a rule, repeated exposure to your message is usually necessary to motivate action for people. So again, just some sort of rules of thumb. And then just very quickly, to be sure to leave time for a discussion, as I said, we're just going to talk about some resources that you can use. So I think this is where Lisa takes back over.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Again, we will send these resources out, or they will be on the NHC website, so you can see them. Health literacy, has quite a few online resources, and we'll add some more resources here that are specifically for advocacy work. Let's see. Now we get to the question part. What questions do you have for us? I know we've had a lot of information. Somebody noted in the chat that, let's see. Yeah, when we were talking about video, Susan Bornstein said, I'm curious about their appeal since it's faster to read a story than watch one. I assume, I think that's when we were talking about video.
Yeah.
Carlos said, big fan of whiteboard animations. Were you going to say something, Chris?
Well, I was going to say on the video piece, I don't think it's an either or, and I think video is just like all these tools. You probably want to be deploying all of these, just doing it strategically. So, and a lot of this stuff that we're talking about, and then because I just saw another question on the effects of the sort of the altruistic appeal. And so a lot of this comes from our work developing materials, specifically clinical trial summaries, but other things too, and showing them to people and asking them questions about, does this make sense? Do you understand this? Does it communicate the science clearly? And so on. And when we ask about questions about reach and how do you prefer to take in messages, everybody likes video, but we also have people who say, I love a good video, but I also want to have something that I can print out and hold in my hands, that I can refer back to later. And so I think it's just a matter of using the different channels strategically. So, videos are great for telling stories. Videos can be shared, far and wide really quickly and really easily. Web content, on the other hand, or if you have a one-pager that you want to produce and it's oriented towards print or PDF or whatever, maybe think about those in terms of like showing data, maybe connected over to the story. Yeah, so it's not like it's a horse race between video or print, it's just sort of what's the right way to reach the right audience at the right time. And lastly, on that video piece, short videos, people don't watch really long videos. So, having a 2 or 3 minute video that gets to your main points really quickly can be really powerful. And then on the altruism piece, that also, that also comes from, again, because the lion's share of our work really is in this healthcare, health literacy space. And so, when we talk about clinical trials and whether it's returning results to participants or producing clinical trial summaries that we're going to put out into the world, there's a section in those that are about, risk and benefit, right? And so the benefits of you helped, in the context of return of results, you helped move science forward, or, you helped develop, in the process of developing, new treatment options for people. Those are interesting, but people connect more readily and they have a more positive response to benefits that are, and that's not always, something that we can do in the context of clinical trial summaries, but people connect more readily to, like, how does this affect me? So Carlos, I don't know if that exactly addresses your question, but I think altruism is like a halo, right? Altruism feels good, it feels right, it can get somebody's attention, but if you want to change their mind or motivate them to action, it's really going into, all right, how's this going to affect you personally?
Chris, did you see the question in the Q&A? How do you get people to care about issues that don't directly affect them? That's the $1 million question, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we'd all like to think that we can engage everybody, and reach everybody and turn everybody into an advocate for our issue, but in the end, that's probably not realistic. And I think you just have to, as Lisa was talking about up front, find your audience and speak directly to them.
And make it appealing. Make your communications appealing.
Right.
So they are engaging. Okay, we've got more questions coming in.
Yeah, this is great.
Yeah.
Oh, some of them are just, oh, okay. You can click the question has been answered. Is there any data regarding patient comprehension in format, especially after COVID and a move towards telehealth? Amy, when you say in format, do you mean like comparing different formats in terms of comprehension? Like, do people understand fact sheets better, or do people understand videos better? Is that, oh, okay, thank you. I think that's where we get into the, I'm not aware of any specific data that's studies that are measuring that, that are, putting fact sheets up against videos or putting videos up against websites or anything like that. I mean, I think that's where the overlap between format and content really comes in, and having clear content, you have to start there. And then the format piece is really like getting the right message at the right time in front of the right audience, if that makes any sense. So Lisa, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah. No, it's testing. Yeah, just learning what works for you, for your audience, keeping data on the results that you're getting. Amy's also asking about, do you create scripts or cheat sheets for the people who, coaching the people who are delivering pieces, like when you're recruiting patients for clinical trial? And yes, we actually we have worked on scripts for, researchers who are interviewing people. trying
Yeah.
to make sure that they have really clear instructions about, what they're supposed to do in these interviews, and giving them, making their scripts as clear as possible, so that they're asking the right questions, and the people they're interviewing are understanding them.
Yeah. Amy, we're actually doing that right now. And Lisa, I think this is something that you haven't even been involved with here at HLM, but we're working with an advocacy group that's, I mean, it's incredible how specific the groups are becoming. So we're working with an advocacy group that's organized around a specific biomarker for non-small cell lung cancer. So cancer site, cancer type, specific biomarker. I mean, we're talking about three, nested levels of sort of audience, narrowing down your audience. And so we're working with them to produce a video right now. And so the founders of this group, we're working with them to kind of tell the story of their group, why it exists, what they want to do with it. And that's exactly what we did, is kind of came up with a framework of not really talking points, but like, when we have the vision for what are the sections of this video going to be, we didn't want to put words into these sort of passionate advocates' mouths, because that would be sort of disingenuous. But, we gave suggestions about, okay, and this sort of gets to a question here from Nita about best practices for putting a video together too. Is it what's, thinking about communication objectives, what's this section A of the video going to be about? What's section B of the video going to be about? And so on. And that way we thought the founders of this advocacy group could, read these bullet points and think about them for a minute, and then give their answer in their own words. And so, that's obviously an iterative process, coming up with those, what those bullet points or what those talking points were going to be. Yeah, so hopefully, Amy, that answers your question. And then Nita, just to sort of unpack that a little bit more. I mean, the way we approach video from sort of a planning standpoint at the very beginning isn't all that different from planning a document. Oh, you're welcome, Amy. In terms of deciding what are my communication objectives, who's my audience, what do they know already, what do they don't know, what do we want to teach them, and then what questions do they have, and then how are we going to answer them. And so that's sort of, when you go through those questions, you develop your well, of content that you can always go back to. And but then obviously with video, there's the steps of, if you have a voiceover, there's different styles of video. So I think that's one decision point, is what are we going to do here? Are we going to have sort of a talking head type person? Is it going to be a voiceover with sort of video vignettes, or what you might call B-roll? Is it going to be animated? There's sort of kinetic text infographic. So I think those are really those foundational pieces of what are you trying to say? What format do you use? Do you want to use saying when you're trying to say it? And then it's just kind of a matter of, if it's a voiceover video, you want to write a script. If it's in a lot of videos, you see this sort of video blog format that can just be an edited together sort of jump cuts of a subject matter expert talking, and those are relatively quick and easy to make. But if you're getting into something that's more visual, maybe it has animation, storyboarding is a step that you can take, and making sure that the visuals are supporting the written or the spoken part of your video. We'll often put a table together that says on one column is the script or the voiceover, and the other column is a description or even a sketch of what the accompanying visual is going to be. So yeah, we could do a whole webinar on video production. I think that would be really fun. But hopefully that gets you started at least in the right direction, Nita, if you are starting down the path of putting videos together.
Yeah, I think, Chris, that again, the most important thing to my mind there is writing down those questions that you think your audience is going to want to know about your topic. Once you have those questions in your mind, you can prioritize them and think about, what are the most important questions? What do we want to answer first? Which questions, maybe we divide these questions up into 3 or 4 different videos. But that to me is really the key to helping you decide what content you're going to put out there. And the other thing we do a lot for written documents is we do actual outlines. Let's say you have a whole set, a series of the, patient recruitment materials. You have, your brochure, and then you have the informed consent form and study visit guide and all of those things. Particularly, if they're kind of medium to long documents, do outlines for each of those, and then you and your team can see at a glance, okay, we've covered these things in this document. Are they repeated in this document, or what's missing? Outlines can really help you, see that at a glance as well.
Just for fun, I put a link to our company's Vimeo page into the chat here. Just if you'd like to watch some of the videos that we've created over the years. And I just wanted to share that because, you can see we have a mix of animation, sort of live action, combination of different things. In terms of how to get people to watch videos, yeah, it's definitely not if you build it, they will come. Getting your video on YouTube is really important because YouTube is after Google, it's the second biggest search engine. But it's also a matter of folding your video into your overall kind of strategic communication plan. So, if you do direct email, if you have a social media page, making sure that you don't just, park it on YouTube or park it on your website and kind of hope people will get there. And, the YouTube algorithm is the more people watch it, the more people watch it. So if you can start out just by promoting it to your audience that you have the most strong connection with, people on your email list or your social media followers, then that's going to reward that video. Ask people to, every video blog you've ever seen, what do they say at the end? Like and share. That's getting that engagement is how you get more viewers. And so, yeah, I don't think there's any magic to it. It's just sort of folding your videos into the communication you're already doing and make sure you're promoting them.